Three, two, one. Oh, we are live. It's another edition of the Living the Dream podcast. I'm Beth Duran. Thanks for joining me on Living the Dream. I told you I'm going to start getting more consistent with it as far as the Living the Dream people. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can always subscribe and check it out on YouTube at my page, Beth Duran. As always, everything that goes afterwards gets shown and saved to my podcast page, where you can check it out at Living the Dream. That's the page right there. The past episode with Gustavo Arellano, also with Roberto Andrade Franco from El Paso. And Gustavo just became the editor, the newest columnist at the LA Times. He's the 6th ever Latino columnist for the LA Times in their history. So, without further ado, what's going on, Beto? Well, this has been years in the making. Today's guest, and the reason being, he's always wanted to be on. I always wanted him on, but as I've told you guys in the past, when I was doing Living the Dream, I always wanted the person in front of me because it adds to it, and also because my sponsor, Mo at Craft Beer Kings, we can crack open the beer and have it together. Well, during the pandemic, I slowed down on Living the Dream, and then all of a sudden, everybody realized they learned how to talk on camera. Not that this guest didn't, but so I'm going to start doing more of the Living the Dreams, get going, and it's just fun to do. It loses a little bit when you're on video, when you're separated, because you got to wait for the connection, the little delay, but it's still fun to do. And today's guest, well, he's here. He is finally making his debut on Living the Dream from the USA Today basketball coverage. Did a great job for himself in his career. I can say I knew him when he was a Met Pro at the LA Times, the pride of Syracuse, York, Pennsylvania, where he's at right now. Mark Medina makes his debut on the Living the Dream podcast. Medina, how are you doing? Congratulations, you finally made it.
Beto Duran, I am on cloud nine right now because this is a huge milestone. I will tell you this, and I'm not bullshitting you here. This is a true story. Ever since my good friend James Wagner from the New York Times, when he went on your podcast, what was this, 2 or 3 years ago? Yeah. He's always been bragging to me about it, always teasing me, oh, why isn't Beto having you on? You guys live in LA, I live in New York, and now I can, go back at him. Because I don't think he's been a repeat guest.
No. I don't. The only people who've been repeat guests have been Gustavo, just because he gets people riled up. The story between Mark Medina and I, we've covered the Lakers together for a lot of years. Medina is like that little brother. I love harassing him a lot. And I always make the joke that Medina, who's really accomplished and just blown by everybody in our business now, is the guy who I told him, you're not in the Latino Media All-Stars. I said that as a joke one time, and Medina took it serious. And he's like, okay. Because he's that little brother you can poke with, but he doesn't know that you're messing with him, and he takes everything serious. The only runs to his mom. Mom, he said this. So we just kept it up, and kept going. So when people are like, when are you going to have Medina on the podcast? I was like, never. When Medina came on, never. Why would I have him on? He's not an all-star. So it just became a running joke. But no, it was more of the reason you never were on because of the logistics of what's going on. Because once I started doing the podcast, I stopped covering the Lakers, and you moved on from LA, where you went to the Warriors, and you've been on different beats. So you went to Syracuse. You're in York, Pennsylvania right now, is where you grew up, visiting your family, just fresh out of the bubble. Let's just give people your background real quick. Met you were covering the Lakers for the broadcast, the digital side, because you were one of the first guys to walk around with the video camera, 2010 maybe, 11, something like that?
2010, yeah.
You're walking around with the video camera, people are like, who's this guy? He's not a writer. From there, you went to the Daily News, right? And then what?
Yeah, so 2008, when I was in Metro with LA Times, it was general assignment. You're bouncing around different sections. 2010, Lakers blogger. That's when I had the camera going on. 2012, Lakers beat writer with the LA Daily News. Did that 5 years, as you know, and then went up to the Bay to cover the Warriors for Bay Area News Group. I did that for a hot second. It was 2 seasons, and then came back to LA last fall for this new job with USA Today, because now I'm one of their national NBA writers, but I'm handling the Western Conference. They wanted me back in LA because, there's 2 teams that are kind of a big deal with the Lakers and the Clippers. It all made sense. It's cool how everything was going full circle here with the 10-year anniversary of the Lakers getting back in the playoff contention and us come full circle too.
Yeah, it's cool. So like Medina, like I said, I always harass you a little bit, but it's out of love, de cariño. So you fresh out of actually my other graphics are up there. Here we go. You're fresh out of the NBA bubble. You were in Orlando. How long?
I got there July 12th, and I left September 9th. So
Jeez.
57 consecutive days. And I will tell you this, Beto.
Wow.
And you can back me up on this, knowing me in the business, I'm not one of those media schmoes that complains about things. I just do the work, right? So this lifestyle is a lot better than what's going on in the world with everyone unemployed and a lot of hardships. But this was the most challenging thing I've ever encountered, because you were there for I was there for 57 consecutive days, no days off, and you're logging 15, 16-hour days, and there's just no off-on switch. And so I'm bringing that up not to complain. I'm bringing that up to mention, hey, it's a challenge of how do you figure out. It's one thing to do the grind for a few days, but then you have a day to charge the batteries. But doing that 57 consecutive days, it's almost like comparing to an athlete. How do you do that without the recovery time? It was a puzzle to figure out, but a challenge.
57 days, how many COVID tests did you take?
57 tests. We got tested literally every single day.
The one in your nose?
Okay, so I got the mouth swab, and then I got the one in the nose. But, Beto, it wasn't the deep one. It was on the sides, each tip, but it was just at the tip. So it wasn't painful. It lasted, 20 seconds?
Yeah.
But that routine was part of the overall day that always felt like Groundhog's Day. You would go to this hotel room that they sectioned off as a testing facility, and it just felt like every day was the same thing over and over and over again.
All right, so take me back through the process. Once you find out that you're going to the bubble, you had a quarantine before you got there, right?
Yeah, so I arrived there July 12th. Once we got to the property, I had a quarantine for 7 days. So that means I literally couldn't leave my hotel room. And the hotel room wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it did the job. It was clean, functional, but you couldn't leave the room for an entire week. You would have meals delivered outside your door 3 times a day, 8 a.m., noon, 6. You'd have a health tester come in the middle of the afternoon, do the whole nose swab and the mouth swab, and then you're just in your room the whole time. Now, it's not like I didn't have things to do. I had a lot of things to write about, doing TV appearances, doing radio hits, but it was one of those things of how do you not get stir crazy just being in the room?
Yeah.
But the one thing that kept me sane, Beto, is the reality is when this pandemic hit, the season ended early March, I was mostly just staying at home anyway. Now I'd venture out to go to the grocery store, get a nice run, get some exercise, but I was mostly at home. So I'm thinking, well, I've been here this long for the most part in my house for 4 months. What's an extra week going to do? So it was nice to get out, but the 7 days weren't that bad.
It's interesting because James Wagner, our good friend, is watching right now. Wagner. Yeah, So Wagner covers baseball for the New York Times. You know what, Wags? I should call you next week. How about you come on and you do this show? So next week we'll get you on, Wagner, for the New York Times.
I am directly responsible for that, by the way.
Yeah, you are, because it's different. Because I've been doing the boxing bubbles where you show up and different states, different rules. Like in Oklahoma, it was because we flew, you had a quarantine for 48 hours, and I get that Groundhog Day feel where you're standing around in your room and you wake up and there's a meal at your door and you're like, okay, great. And then you're counting down for the next meal and the next meal, stuff like that. And it sucks. I can't imagine what you're doing. Yeah, you're working, Medina, but you got no family with you, nobody around you. You're in a hotel room, and as cool as hotels are, they get old after 2 days. Every morning you had to wake up and take a test. So you would wake up and you would go where?
Well, when I was in quarantine, the health people came to my door.
Okay.
Well, once I got out of quarantine, maybe like a 5-minute walk on the same hotel property, they had sectioned off a specific hotel room that you would knock on the door, health inspectors would open the door, and then you'd do the whole mouth and nose swab and then leave 20, 30 seconds later. I mean, the entire day felt like Groundhog's Day because you would wake up before you would step outside to do tests. You had to go on your cell phone, fill out a health app where you would have to report if you had any symptoms. You would have to take your temperature. You'd have to do the oximeter reading, which measures your oxygen levels. So you do that. When you leave the room, you got to get tested, and then you would just go to practices during the afternoon, go to games at night. The games that I went to, because I'm their West Coast guy, they wanted me to do the 9 o'clock games, the Lakers Blazers series, the Clippers Mavs series. Those games were at 9 o'clock on consecutive days. So, the typical day was waking up between 9 and 10 a.m., doing all that stuff in the morning, getting some work done, hopping on conference calls, and then afternoon practices, doing some write-ups off of that, some radio hits, whatever, going to the game, and then getting done by, maybe 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and then do it again. It was fun. I love the gig. I'm never going to lose enthusiasm for it, but it's a matter of how do you just muster up the energy to do it again. And thankfully, there was a lot of junk food and caffeine and frappuccinos to get me through.
Are you allowed to interact with anybody? Like, can you have dinner with other reporters?
Yes and no. I mean, you have to do the social distancing rules. So everywhere you go, you got to wear the mask. You got to obey the social distancing rules. So I could go to practices. I could go to games. You could be at the press conferences, but it's just not the same interactions. Like when we're in the Lakers locker room, talking with the players, you can't really have that kind of interaction. It's all kind of at an arm's length. There were times you could certainly get dinner, but there weren't any restaurants on the site itself. So all the food that you're getting, it was at a place at the hotel that you would take out or near the arena, but they would have tables there. You can eat together. There's a bar on the campus that you could get, but a lot of the downtime was few and far between because we're all busy. We all had games to play.
But Medina, okay, so say you're done. Say you're done, right? And you're like, okay, I'm clear. Everybody else is clear. Let me go to my buddy from the New York Times, his room, and have a beer with him. You can't do that, right?
You can't do that. Nope, you can't stay in anyone else's hotel room. So you would have to find these common areas. Like there's these tables by a pool. There was this bar that's on the section of our campus, and they would have a bunch of tables there. So it's almost like, and that bar was only open till midnight. So a lot of times by the time we're done, it's past that. It's one of those things you just BYOB.
So, because I know Mark Spears from ESPN, big wine guy, he was having wine shipped to him, and I know he was having like little powwows. That's where it was, right? Those common areas?
Yeah, that's what it's always all about. So you make the best of it. And here's the thing. Compared to how a lot of people are.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing, Beto, the difference that it makes of just seeing people, even if it's not the same as it was during the normal, before COVID, but just seeing people and even being 6 feet apart. That did wonders as opposed to just doing all these Zoom calls. I'm so over the Zoom calls.
Yeah, and now I worked the LAFC game the other day and covering the Rams and just football, and as a reporter, like I said, if you listen to this, nobody's complaining. It's just you can't do the job the way you would. And like Medina's a kid that we'd always mess around with, that he'd always linger. And Medina was good. And I'm saying this in a good way, Mark, where after the scrum, so in the media terms, it's everybody's around the athlete. You'll see like in movies where everybody's like talking, but then you get the best information when you linger. You kind of hold back and you pretend to look at your notes. Medina's the king of that because he'll kind of just hang back and he'll have an extra 30 seconds with that person. And then next thing you read Medina's story, you're like, what the hell? That guy didn't tell us this. He's like, damn it, Medina stuck around. And that's what a good reporter does. You build that relationship with somebody where you're not always interviewing them, but you're having a conversation. Those days are now gone, right, Mark? You're not going to have that.
Yeah, it for the most part was gone. Now, they did make some exceptions here or there. You're not going to have those walk-offs that you could have during normal times, but you could pre-arrange interviews with people. So sometimes I was able to get that, but a lot of the high-profile guys weren't doing things, partly because they're doing their own brand, and also a lot of it was just the compressed schedule. These teams were practicing every other day, games every other day. So I think the teams themselves didn't want to put, too much on the guys.
But that makes your job harder, right?
there were opportunities, and you know what? It was a job. It made it a challenge. But I think what it did for me was this: you find the teams and the players that maybe you have a relationship with, and see if that can help your odds, and it certainly did. And then secondly, maybe it is all you can get is the group scrums that's being broadcast on Zoom. But you know what? Try to find a good topic to talk about with those guys. Ask a certain question. Some of the things that I did was come up with an idea and just go to different practices and ask that specific thing, and then turn it into a story. And so even if it's out in the general public and everyone can use it, because you're taking ownership of it and you have an idea of what that story will be about, you kind of almost have a leg up on it.
That sucks. I mean, no, because we take pride as reporters of knowing what nobody else does as far as your competition, whether it's like Sports Illustrated, ESPN, and Athletic. But like part of the reason that some of the coverage has all been the same is because the lack of access to it. It's like this is when people who are really talented like yourself shine, because you find the different angles, and the people who complain, well, they don't go to the bubble. And like this is right.
Well, you know what's funny? Chris Mannix, good friend from Sports Illustrated, he was giving me a hard time because I went to a Rockets practice. I wanted to do a story on what Russell Westbrook's been like behind the scenes when he was hurt, because he was so flamboyant on the sidelines being a cheerleader. And everyone knew at the practice what I was writing about, because I was just asking Mike D'Antoni, the coach, different players. And so everyone knew there, hey, this is what Medina's going to write about. But one of the players gave some really good quotes saying, yeah, Russ has been so annoying. Like, he's a pain in the ass. And they gave good material. And you know what? I walked back to the hotel room, wrote it up, and there you go. So sometimes you got to, make lemonade out of lemons, so to speak.
What was the hardest part for you?
I think the idea of being able to carry that energy day to day. Like, I was never someone that lost enthusiasm for the job of covering the sport itself and just the whole idea of what you do. But it was long days. You didn't get a lot of sleep. You weren't eating good food. And I think because of that, your energy can dwindle. And so the analogy is, how does a player perform when he's not fully healthy, or he's not fully 100%? You find a way to just push through. And so in a weird, twisted way, Beto, it became a fun challenge. Like, how do you just keep plowing through and navigate, and just to hell with feeling tired? Like, let that catch up to you when the bubble setup ends, right?
Is there a gym for you to use? Because I know you like working out.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Yeah,
okay.
So it's a gym on site, so I would try to do that whenever I could. The challenging part about the gym was you have to wear a mask. And look, I'm taking this seriously. You need to wear a mask, but it's hard to work out when you're in one. So what I was doing, I would work out in my hotel room. I would do like...
It sucks.
It sucks.
The resistant bands and all that other stuff. I get you're being creative, but it sucks. Because I did that when I was in Oklahoma for a week. I'm like, this sucks, man. I got tired of it. You can only do so many damn push-ups.
Yeah, well, this is what I would do, but I'll do 15 rounds, 10 jumping jacks, squats, 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, do it 15 rounds.
Yep. You're doing.
Hey, it makes a bit of a difference.
You're
right?
doing Cholo Creeper Fit workouts, bro. You're doing it.
When I go to the bus stop, because we would have to take a bus to go to the arenas. There was this courtyard. While I'm waiting for the bus, I would just be taking a walk in a circle to get some.
Man,
some
Medina, people were picking on you, huh? Other members of the media were annoyed with you, huh?
Yeah. Here's what I would say. I was like, I don't give a shit. Like, here's the thing, Beto. As you know, I always clap back. I defend myself, but also I don't care either. Like, if someone wants to make fun of me, I don't care. So it's all good.
That's why I love you, Medina, because since day one I've harassed you and you've always clapped back, and I'm like, cool, because I even told you, like, you're not even a real Mexican because you're from Pennsylvania. You know, like I said you were Amish when I met you because you're from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And
you still do say that.
Yeah, I still do, because it turns out you do live in Amish country, right? Right now, where are you?
Yes, but then I would have to say it about over here.
Okay, where are you right now?
actively live in Amish country. That's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. York, Pennsylvania is 30 to 45 minutes away from Lancaster. There's no Amish people in York, Pennsylvania.
Medina, you're in LA. Nobody gave a damn about where the
Oh,
hell, but you were so adamant. Like, I'm not Amish. I'm like, no, of course you're not. We know you're not. And we'll get into your background and how you're a fake Mexican and all that other stuff later on. No, you are. You're legit. That's why we're having you on Mexican Independence Day. So no, Medina. So back to the NBA bubble. You're going there. You're trying to figure things out. Is it true that the players were in a different level? Like for games, normally the media sits on the floor. Where would you guys sit?
Yeah, so I was in the Tier 1 bubble. So the people who were in Tier 1, they had to be staying there the whole time, get the daily testing. And as a result of that, I could go to the arena. I could watch the games live. I had better seats than I did in most NBA arenas because usually what's happening is, a lot of the press seats are moving higher and higher so they can make room for more fans.
Okay.
And charge a lot of money. Here, there aren't any fans. So we sat on like one corner to the right behind the basket.
Okay, so, because I'll see on TV some of the owners, they're like higher behind glass. They can't go lower?
Well, that's because they're in Tier 2. A lot of times we would have better seats than they did because they weren't staying on campus the whole time. They weren't doing the daily testing. So for us, who were in Tier 1, we could be on the ground floor.
Oh, so they can't interact with the players.
Well, I can interact.
No, they can't.
Yeah, they can.
Oh.
And I can. So that gives you a little bit of a leg up, maybe for some perspective. And I think, a lot of media companies, because of what's going on in the world, the safety concerns, the economic concerns, every outlet has its own resources and challenges, but I think that there was a significant difference in being down there. Even though there were the access limitations, just seeing people, getting a feel for the body language, the tone, the human interaction, it gave you a perspective, and also gave me perspective on how this whole bubble setup would operate, and is this the safe thing to do? And I can tell you, I was willing to go on this trip because I felt like the NBA was setting itself up to succeed. But once I was down there, I was impressed with just how thorough it was and how much accountability there was. So I think that reflected in my ability to tell the stories with everything, the games, because you would see and hear things on the court that you couldn't on TV, the health and safety setup, what life is like on the bubble, and then, the things about, racial and social justice initiatives. Sometimes that's on Zoom, and then sometimes I'm able to arrange interviews with different players about some of those projects. And so that wouldn't have been possible if I was just doing it from home.
It's interesting before we get into all that other stuff, because you've been very vocal on your Twitter about stuff, and I'm proud of you for, growing up like that. Because I said, I've known you since you were an intern, so where you're at now, it's like you become a fine young man, Medina. The stuff about the racial injustices where the players were going on. Were you at the game when the Bucks did not come out on the court?
I was, but I wasn't there right away. And the logistics of that was, at the time, that wasn't the main game to go to. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, that's a newspaper that USA Today oversees. So,
where you going?
So what I was doing, Beto, is before that game was happening, the Celtics and the Raptors had been openly talking about, we might boycott this game because of the Jacob Blake shooting. So what I was doing, I was going to different practices and talking to teams. Hey, what do you think about what they're doing? Or have you guys had those conversations? And so I was at practice availabilities for the Clippers, the Utah Jazz, and the Dallas Mavericks. And they were all saying the same thing. We respect and understand what the Celtics and the Raptors are talking about, but as of now, we haven't had those discussions. Our games are planned to go as normal. And then as soon as the Mavericks practice ended, I saw on Twitter, Bucks didn't take the court. And I was like, oh man, this is crazy. So I went to the bus stop and took the next shuttle down to go to the court and see what's going on. And by the time I got there, and this was only like 20 minutes later, the Bucks were the Magic had already left the arena, because they weren't the ones that had planned that. It was the Bucks. But the Bucks had still been in the locker room. They were there for the next 2 hours, deliberating about what's the next step. They had some conference calls with different state government officials about, what they're doing from a legislation standpoint with police reform and what can they do to hold, the police accountable for shooting Jacob Blake. And so I was there when they came out, out of the locker room 2 hours later, and they read the statement. So it was surreal. I mean, you're literally covering history. This is a huge part of, and not only just the country, but obviously with the NBA and how they're trying to use this platform for good.
That's interesting because you went there to cover basketball during a pandemic. The country changes, so much going on. What was the atmosphere like inside the bubble? Because those players are there, the media's there, and it's a bubble. The only thing you know is what you're hearing on the news, and it can be skewed different ways. Like, not what you wrote, but just what you saw, Medina. How did it feel in the bubble during those days?
You mean when they decided to not take the court?
Just in general, like that week, because I'm telling you, the tension outside of the bubble in the United States, huge. But what was it like in there? Because everybody there is for one reason, that's for basketball. So I'm pretty sure there was conversations being held, whether it was amongst you other media members or the players, or when you have the Zoom conversations with these guys.
Yeah, I think on the surface, it would seem like this really peaceful environment, and it was. It was very safe. They would call it the safest place on earth. But the entire time that I was in the bubble, there was always this feeling of everyone being unsettled for numerous reasons. The health and safety concerns, the time away from family. Even before the Jacob Blake shooting, the NBA had gone into the season wanting to use it as a platform to address systemic racism because of the George Floyd killing on Memorial Day. So that was already going to be a theme. And so as much as we were disconnected from our eyes and ears from the outside world and the protests, anything going on, I think all of us were in tune with following the news and being a part of that conversation. But when the Jacob Blake shooting happened, that became a huge turning point for a lot of the league because the players started to wrap their heads around of, are we really making a difference? And are we doing enough? And are the people that we're hoping to reach, what's holding up their end of the bargain? And so I think, when you're talking about that protest and the boycott of the game, there was some frustration from the teams that the Bucks didn't give them the heads up, but they also supported the cause because when you're looking at it, it created some pressure. When they didn't take the court, all of a sudden, Wisconsin state government officials are talking to people in the Bucks organization about, okay, what else can we do? When they decided, hey, we're not going to play games for a few days, and they're talking to the Board of Governors meeting, as much as those Board of Governors have been supportive of, having Black Lives Matter on the court and, kneeling during the national anthem to protest systemic racism and donating money to different causes, players still felt like, you can take it an extra step. And so with those conversations, there was even more commitment to get, the venues that are normally used for games into polling sites for the election.
There was so much going on.
Put even more money into using the political capital that all sports organizations have into twisting arms for local and state officials into passing different forms of police reform, criminal justice reform, etc.
When the teams took those votes, whether they're going to continue the season, and the reports were that the Lakers and the Clippers said that they weren't going to. Were you around for that?
Well, I obviously wasn't in the room, but I was. I was hearing those same things. Now, you have to be fair to the news, and it was such a fluid thing. But in the back of my mind, I didn't ever feel that the season was going to be, suspended completely. There were a lot of emotions there, but I think that there was a lot of tactical strategies involved where if players felt like there wasn't even more commitment from the owners and the league, that they would be willing to walk away.
How
And
was
when
LeBron? Sorry to cut you off, but how was LeBron?
he was great. He was an open book, as professional as can be, and he was very thoughtful with his answers. So when you would press him on things, he went very in depth. You could tell that he was, prepared to take this role, and he had taken it seriously. And I think the other thing, specifically LeBron James and Doc Rivers, and this isn't to say that other people weren't feeling this, because they were, but I think they were the face of it. Mm-hmm. The week of the Jacob Blake shooting, you could tell with their words and their body language that this hit them even more than even before, with the frustration with the George Floyd killing, the fact that the police that killed Breonna Taylor haven't been held accountable, because it was a feeling of yet another incident, number one, and number two, are our voices going to finally be taken seriously? And they're going to continue to speak out. But at the same time, they were stressing, look, it's not on us solely to solve the world's problems. Mm-hmm. We'll use our platform, but it also takes the people in position of power to hold their end of the bargain. So with that week, Doc and LeBron specifically were very emotional during their press conferences when they were talking about these issues.
Medina, you cover the NBA, the Western Conference, for a national newspaper, USA Today. Big responsibility. But you could have easily wrote a LeBron story every single day, because we see what's going on, because LeBron moves the needle, whether it's officials going against him, the president going against him, or people supporting him, whatever it is, the amount of scrutiny that this man gets right now, the amount of praise that he gets right now. Yeah, you can say he's professional. We've all been around him. LeBron is one of the most professional athletes I've ever encountered from when he was a rookie back then. But now that he's grown up in being this man who has a loud voice, can you feel inside the bubble that he's making a difference?
I think he is, because every time that he would have these press conferences, it would dominate the news cycle. But it wasn't even just about that. He was doing tangible things. I think the most notable example is he started More Than a Vote, which has been helping with people in the black community get registered to vote, and also putting financial resources to have people that were previous felons with a chance to vote. And look, it's been stressed to me, with the felons in particular, it's not like they're not helping people who've been convicted of murder or sexual assault or being a pedophile. It's not that, but it's for these minor infractions. A lot of times when they have those things on their record, all of a sudden they can't vote because either it's on their record or the fines are too expensive for them to pay off. And so that's been another effort to help those underprivileged people have an opportunity to vote. And so I think that he is making a difference there, but now it's about the next step. And I think what the next step was, that pivot point of the NBA deliberating whether they would have a season or not. I think LeBron was very influential in getting even more commitments from the teams, again, of having the venue sites be served as either early voting polling places or polling places on election day. And as of now, 20 out of 30 venues have committed. And there are some complicated logistics. The Bucks, for example, they're not able to get their arena as a polling place because the election commission said, hey, the deadline's passed. The Bucks have stressed to me, look, there isn't nothing nefarious going on here. We just missed the deadline. But there are more teams that they're trying to twist arms to show more commitment. But so far, it's 20 out of 30.
Medina, we get into sports because it's fun. It's, what do they say? It's the toy box of the, right? The toy box of the newspaper. Yet, you were doing a lot of political writing via the sports angle. How was that for you? Because you're all supposed to, your Twitter, you started making some political comments on your own opinions, which is perfectly fine for you. But that's not what we do as reporters. But it just seems like 2020 is such a year where all the rules are out the window. What was it like realizing that nobody cares about the damn score. It's more about what's going on in the world. That's unique to me.
Yeah, it is unique. Now, I would push back a little bit. It is semantics, but I think it makes a difference. I don't view this as a political thing. It's not like they're talking about.
No, I'm not saying it's political thing. It's just more of where what their comments were getting used for political world.
Oh, of course, of course.
And so you're now with the story you're writing, Medina, is now no longer just a sports page. It's now a front page. It's front news.
Yeah, for sure. I will say this. This has been a new challenge, but I think covering the Golden State Warriors, it was a good, it was almost like I had the training wheels on the bike during that time, because that team in particular was one of the most outspoken about Donald Trump, and not even just about him, just about things going on in the country with protesting during the national anthem and racial inequality in general. And Beto, you'll appreciate this. My first day covering the Warriors was Media Day, and the whole theme of that season on Media Day to open up was, hey, are they going to go to the White House? They've been so critical of Donald Trump and his rhetoric, and they're very frustrated at that time. This was after the Charlottesville riots with the white supremacists, and he's not condemning them. And Steph Curry is saying, look, if it's up to me, I'm not going. While the rest of the team, they're kind of towing the line and saying, hey, we're planning to have meetings. So we wrote that, and then the very next morning, Donald Trump tweets, oh, the Warriors are disinvited, because of what Steph Curry said. So that first practice day was just this controversy with the White House and getting the reaction from the Warriors.
It's you, Medina. It's not the world. It's you. You're the one creating all these problems. It's you.
My problem. Yeah, it's all. Blame it on me, Beto.
It is.
You'll appreciate this though. That first day at Warriors practice, because I'm the new guy, right? Like I'm getting acquainted with the new beat.
I already know.
I always want to come in with like a humble mindset, like, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I'm also confident in what I do. And someone kind of pulled me to the side, like, hey, how's the first day on the beat, sort of thing, like kind of nudging me, like, man, this is overwhelming. And I'm like, man, have you ever seen what Lakers Media Day was? I covered the Lakers Media Day when they nixed the Chris Paul deal. I covered a practice, and I don't want to make light of it, but we thought there was a time when we might have lost Lamar Odom, right? Yeah. And it was like, look, I've covered crazy, heavy stuff, whether it's the goofy or the serious.
We were, Mark Medina, we were in the Kardashians.
Yes.
We weren't on the show, but remember they filmed us. We had to sign the paperwork because Lamar Odom is getting a haircut in the media room, and we're doing our work, and Lamar is talking about Chloe and this and that, and we're like, and he's talking to us about it. And then afterwards, the producer's like, "Oh, you guys got to sign this." We're like, "What the what?
Yeah.
What the fuck?"
And you know what's funny? I think you got a lot of airtime on that show. I don't think
the side of my face was on a lot because whenever he got a haircut, because he'd always sit by me, and I was like, "But yeah, but it was just, it's like you can do Laker stuff, you can do anything." But I get it. I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, but to answer your question, there are a lot of stories of the players using their platform for good. Not even just speaking on the president, but what they've been doing in the community. So I think that experience itself prepared me for this new experience with the pandemic, because you didn't want to go down the road of just regurgitating what's said in press conferences and them speaking out on whatever. I think it's an important thing to write about, but I think what was also important to me was to add even more substance and context to highlight a lot of different things that players are doing behind the scenes, getting into their own backstory. So I think, that resulted in different stories where I put together a story detailing for players, their own experiences dealing with police when they were kids, because this obviously shapes how they view this whole situation, because they had different challenges. And then, I think one example in particular, because I knew him from covering the Warriors, Andre Iguodala gave me some time where I could get some one-on-one time with him. And he's been doing a lot of things where he was already doing a lot of investments in the tech company because he's trying to expand a business portfolio. But lately, he's been investing in particular tech companies that will help Black communities. It's his belief that as much as voting is an important thing, it's also about upward mobility and
Without a doubt.
being able to support yourself. And so when you build that equity and build, self-sufficiency, you can support, generations of families. You can improve your education. You can improve your neighborhood. And so I think that provided, I think, more layers to the conversation than just relying on what's said in a Zoom press conference about the latest incident of something.
It's an interesting business we're in, Medina. I'm happy for you and your success. Now, you're a kid from Amish country in Pennsylvania. You came out in Kingpin. Then you made it big to the L.A. What do you know about fishing, Medina?
Hey, man, I know a lot about fishing.
Oh, all of a sudden? Because you went fishing. I'm showing you a picture of you fishing, of course, with your mask on right now, wearing that red shirt. Now, they have a lake in Orlando, right?
Yes. I have it on the property, yeah.
All right. Had you ever gone fishing before in your life?
Yes. So in York, Pennsylvania, I had a few childhood friends that I would go fishing with, different community lakes.
Opie?
Friend ponds.
Opie and Andy, you going with those guys?
What's that?
You going with Opie, Andy, and all the other guys, the little rascals?
Yeah, all those guys, yeah. I've gone deep sea fishing before.
Okay, so you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing, but I will say it's not like I'm this avid fisherman. I'm this huge expert. When we went on the fishing trip, I did it twice. One with Ben Golliver with the Washington Post, one with Sam Amick with the Athletic. We had a tour guide with us. He drove us around on the boat. He took us to where the spots are. He helped us with the bait, and also when we reel it in, just
so it's a lake inside the property, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one when on TNT when they show the players catching the fish. It's the same exact one. Medina, it was fixed, right? There's no way there's that much fish.
Not fixed. I guarantee.
Come on, it's fake.
No, they're real fish, and it's not like they're adding extra.
Yeah, they are.
It's a vacation resort.
No.
So they normally have fish anywhere, but the thing is, the tour guide knew the tricks of the trade because it's so sunny out. A lot of the fish are hanging out by the dock because it's cooler. So we would go to the docks and cast our lines. So to answer your question, Beto, they would.
It wasn't rigged. It wasn't rigged.
They would no, it wasn't rigged. But they would do the bait for me. But I would cast the line myself. I know how to cast the line. I would reel it in, and once I reeled it in, they would help with taking the fish out. I learned how to do that a little bit, and then I would hold it and display it for Instagram.
I love that you're so adamant about, no, it's not rigged. I know how to fish. I know how to do this.
Here's why I'm adamant about it. I asked the NBA about, hey, is this rigged? And they shot it down so adamantly.
It just so happens that every single person that goes fishing in that lake is able to catch a big monster trout. All of a sudden, right?
Well, I will say this. My second go-around, I was terrible. I was catching little guppy fish. The first time I was around, I was catching these large bass. I was like, man, like what a pro. Yeah. I feel like Paul George, he's one of the best fishermen in the NBA,
He's from Lancaster. He's not from LA. That's why.
Time, I'm just catching little small fish.
Yeah. Now, I saw the video of Taco Fall learning to swim, guys learning to play golf. It was just like the NBA. How do you fill your time? And you saw guys doing stuff that they've never done before. That must have been unique to see or write about.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we couldn't go, not only to the team hotels, but we couldn't tag along to, any team.
Nowhere? So you didn't see any of that?
We couldn't do any of that because of the safety concerns. I would have loved to do that.
So
that would have been story number one. What it's like to see JJ ride a golf for 18 holes.
So
we couldn't do.
All you really did was just watch the games and practice, and that's it.
That's for the most part, yeah.
That sucks.
So those activities, those were for us too, but frankly, Beto, a lot of the times, and this goes for the teams too, we didn't have a lot of time to do those excursions. So here was it for me. I had enough time to do 2 fishing trips. If I wanted to go golfing, I could have, but that would have required me to get up at 6 a.m. for a tee time. And look, when I'm doing a 9 p.m. game and I'm going to bed at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll take the sleep instead of running on 3 hours just so I can golf. So that was more of a personal choice. But there's not enough hours in the day. But I think, I was golfing a little bit at the beginning, when people were saying, hey, what are you going to do in the bubble? It's so boring. And I was kind of thinking, like, who cares? Like, I'm there for a job, and two, like, keep it larger in perspective. But I think that those things were important as time went on, because for everyone,
mentally,
coaches, us, like mentally, you can't be a robot and work, and that's it. You need some sort of release. And that's why the NBA and the players union found it important that there's at least some sort of recreation, whether it's golf, fishing, swimming, having a gym nearby, having a lounge to play video games, just to clear your mind and, beat the monotony of just the constant work of day to day.
Yeah, it's interesting because the MLS, Nico Cantor from Univision was the only reporter allowed in. Him and his photographer, Michele, who I worked LAFC game with him recently, he told me about that. He's like, well, we could play ping pong with them and did a story on it. But that's after the group stage, a bunch of other stuff. But it was really limited access. And Michele, the photographer, does a great job / producer for Univision, was telling me, he's like, dude, you're there and you get sick and tired of your room. You see people and you're just happy. Same exact experience that you're describing, Medina. They had an MLS. They didn't even allow many media members into their bubble just to keep it even smaller. All right, Medina, so it sounded like you survived. You're good. You're out of the bubble. And you get out of the bubble and the Clippers lose. Like, what's going on? So you leave and they lose, ruining the LA playoffs.
You're blaming this on me?
Yes, everything.
Okay. Here, you know what? I am at fault for both the Lakers' demise and the Clippers' demise, because when I became a beat writer, first year was the Steve Nash, Dwight Howard season. We all thought, hey, the Lakers are going to win a championship, not so fast. Yep. In the middle of that season, Meta World Peace, Ron Artest, he said, Medina, this is all your fault. Ever since you became a beat writer, we've sucked.
I was standing by Kobe on the opposite side, and he said it so loud that everybody laughed. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Medina becomes full-time beat writer. He starts traveling with the team. Nash breaks his leg. Dwight is eating McDonald's in the locker room. Nobody gets along. Medina, it's all your fault, bro. It's all your fault. You ruined the hallway series. All right. So now, Medina. So you're a great kid. I love you, man. Big fan of yours as a person too. Let's go to your background on Living the Dream, because you've made your debut as we wrap it up. You're an Amish kid from York, Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, sir.
This is where you correct me. You're not Amish, Medina.
Well, you said rapid fire, so it's like, you know what? News pass.
Okay, but you grew up in York, Pennsylvania, where they have the peppermint patty, right?
Yes, York peppermint patty. Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson's also Milwaukee. York peppermint patty. Harley Davidson. York barbell.
Okay, whatever that is. But your dad is Mexican from Mexico City. Yeah. Right? So how the heck does, what's your dad's name?
Ricardo.
How does Ricardo Medina end up in York, Pennsylvania?
Well, he went to school to get his master's in Penn State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then, he and my mom met there and got married and then decided to stay in the States. There was a lot of back and forth of, I think, initially being in Mexico, but I was always living in the U.S. I was born in a smaller town in York, Pennsylvania, in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. But I've moved to York, I don't know, when I was 2.
You worked to the big city.
Ever since.
Yeah, and so you went from York to Syracuse. Syracuse alum, you're part of the Syracuse Mafia, and then you end up in L.A. And part of the reason, Medina, and I'm going to tell the story, Medina, not the Bernardo Osuna one. I'm going to leave that one alone. Can I tell the Bernie story?
Go for it. It's a great story.
Okay, but the other one is, Medina's a trendsetter. So, and because Medina grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, you didn't have any Mexican cousins around you, right? All your dad's family stayed in Mexico City, right? You said you've been there a couple times, but it's not like you didn't grow up with the Mexican parties of 35 people for a baptism, right? Or you didn't have the quinceañera friends or anything like that, right?
Yeah, I would go there during the holidays every year. So, and then once high school ended, you're in college, whatever. But I would go there frequently, but it's not the same as living.
Exactly. And when I got to know you, I was like, damn, Medina, we grew up different. It's like we're both Mexican roots, both born in the United States, but it's just a matter of demographics of where you grew up. Just like how my niece and nephew live in Denver, it's a little different for them. And I was explaining to you the LA Mexicans, and you're like, well, I know Hispanics. I was like, no, Medina, you're in Syracuse. You met Puerto Ricans, you met Cubans, you didn't know LA Mexicans. So Medina shows up one day before it became trendy, Lakers practice, and he's like, look at my shoes, these are cool. He's wearing Nike Cortezes. Before they became cool a couple years ago. I'm like, Medina, you're like, they were on sale. I'm like, Medina, Cortezes are shoes worn by gangsters, by cholos. Like, the common person doesn't wear those, Medina. You're like, they were white, patent leather, right? They were the leather ones?
They were looking fresh.
They were fresh. They were fresh. I'll give you that. But I was like, Medina, I was like, if I were to take those to my mom's house, I would get thrown out and say, no, you're not a cholo. Get that out of here. Get that out of here. You're like, I don't get it. You're like, and I'm like, oh, he lives in the South Bay. He lives by the beach. He can do that. So we had to educate Medina about being the Mexican in LA. We appreciate it. We taught him well. And then the Bernardo Osuna story. Bernardo Osuna.
I love the roast. I'm loving it.
Because Bernardo Osuna, because this is how much we love you, Medina. Bernardo Osuna, reporter for ESPN, his first day at ESPN, working on the English side. No longer only Spanish. We're at the NBA lockout meetings at the Beverly Wilshire, I believe.
Yep.
Beverly Wilshire Hotel. And all the media, we had to stay in the bar area. And we're all there. Bernardo is in a fresh suit, always impeccable. This guy doesn't drink, just looks great all the time. And he's like standing there in his red tie, a black suit, white shirt. And Medina comes up, and we're standing by the bar, and he's like, hey, to Bernardo, he says hi to me. He has Bernardo Osuna, hey, can I get a Coke? And Bernie says, yeah, the bar is right there. And Medina, right, Mark? You were like, you followed up. You're like, yeah, but can I get one?
Like, yeah, do I order at the bar or do I order through you?
And he really said that. And I'm like, Mark, this is Bernardo Osuna, ESPN reporter. He's going to be on TV. He has makeup on. He has an earpiece in. And you're telling him if I can order a drink through you. And Bernardo Kid, one of the nicest guys, was going to be a priest at LMU, all that other stuff. To this day, he sees Medina, and he goes up to Medina and says, hey, can I get you a Coke? Because a few years ago, remember at Staples Center, we're in the media room.
Every Laker game we would do. And then I would return the favor and say, hey, can I go get you some popcorn?
Yeah. So whenever Bernie was there, we would purposely go stand by the soda machine inside the Staples Center media room, and we'd call Medina over and say, hey, can I get you a Coke, Mr. Medina? Hey, can I get you So that's the kind of rapport that we have with Mark Medina. Great kid. Love him. He does a great job for the USA Today basketball section. You've only covered basketball as your beat, right? That's it. No other sports?
No other sports as a full-time beat writer. Now, when I was at Syracuse and then at the LA Times as an entry-level reporter, I mean, I was bouncing all over the place. You know, when I first started out in MetPro, I was doing like sparks, reps,
beach volleyball
games, doing some NHL.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as once I got to the Lakers blog, it's just been NBA ever since.
Medina, as we wrap this up, I always tell people when I speak to students about chasing your dream and about always working hard. Like, you were given one assignment, and by the time I was at the bar, you were still working. You weren't the guy going to the bar afterwards. You would put in extra work. It became the running joke that you better hurry up and beat Medina because he's going to be at every single thing, and it's true. And that work ethic has paid off. Like, we joked with you and about you because it was like, damn it, Medina's going to do it. We got to do it. But it was the guys who were already established. But when you're younger, we all did the same thing that you're doing. But I respect you, Mark, because you still have that same hustle and effort. Best advice you can give to somebody who wants to get into this fucked up business where there's no jobs?
Well, brother, I appreciate it. As much respect back at you. You're a grinder, hustler. I would say this. When we're talking about work ethic, yes, it is important to just go all in and show up early and do the work. But it's not just about working hard. It's working smart. So one of the things I learned that it's not just about going to practice and being at every single event. You got to make use of that. You've got to be proactive and know how to be efficient, come up with ideas, and that's where working smart is. So I think if you calculate and balance those two things where you're willing to put in the hours, you're willing to live up to that adage of, best dependability is availability, while also coming up with ways of being creative and working smart, that will improve the odds of getting a job. Because right now, especially in 2020 with the pandemic and news organizations really being strapped for money, the system's stacked against everyone. So if you have those two things, I think it'll maximize the whole adage of preparation meeting opportunity.
Preparation meeting opportunity. Medina, like, you are that, man. You keep on hustling. And what I like about you too is, Medina, you have that Mexican attitude. As soon as you have a chance to go home, you're home right now. You're back in York, Pennsylvania. You're in the home you grew up in right now, right?
Yes. And how about this, by the way?
Show us the curtains, Medina. There you go.
This painting right here, my late grandmother painted this.
No way.
But my dad, at his place, he has a lot of paintings from his mother around the house.
Oh, that's cool. That's your abuelita made that, huh?
Yes, sir.
That's cool, Medina. Well, enjoy your time in York. We will do this again. And next time we do this podcast, we're going to do it together in person. That way we can drink. Because you know I'm sponsored, Medina.
That way we can drink, and then we can throw even more shade at James Wagner.
More James Wagner, because I have a bottle of tequila ready for you. Oh, wait, that's the empty one. We got more. We got more tequila. So tell your dad, Ricardo, that I got ready for him, man. Medina, appreciate you as always. If you guys need any help, if you're in this business starting out, or if you're somebody who wants to get into it as a college student, reach out to Mark Medina. Has great advice for you. What an example of just what hard work does and pays off for you. Medina, appreciate you. Keep living the dream, man.
Beto, appreciate you. Keep doing you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, Medina. Adios.
Adios.